Okay, hello everyone. Can y'all hear us on WebEx? Okay,
Yes.
great. Well, okay, welcome. Glad you all are here. So I will ask if there's any bill introductions. I don't think that's a huge possibility, but I'll ask anyway. Okay, don't see any. Okay, so this afternoon, we have the privilege of having a wonderful expert on what we do in this committee with us, Shirley. And so as far as I understand, you're going to go over two things with us. Are you going to do the budget analysis first, or? Okay, we're going to start with the budget analysis and a presentation by Shirley. Be thinking of your questions for her because she can answer all of them. I would just add for those, John did send the committee the attachments for that at 8:17 or 8:16 this morning. Right? What is it? That voice sounds sort of familiar. Okay. It's horrible to hear your own voice, isn't it? Okay, so if you all are trying to pull that up on your laptops, the attachments came this morning about 8:15-ish. Okay, Shirley, thank you. Welcome.
Can't hear her. Cannot hear her.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
So there's a budget analysis from last year's Kansas Board of Healing Arts to give you an idea of what they look like, what information is in them, and how they will be presented to the committee, and to kind of get your feedback on, we don't usually present everything that's in
Madam Chair. Sorry, Shirley. Sorry to interrupt. We're just having the same problems that we were the last time. We'll have to get you close to the microphone if that's okay. Sorry to interrupt.
I'm almost eating it.
We have an IT expert here. Hopefully he'll figure this out. Okay, let's test that. Shirley, test.
Move my head. Is this better?
Getting thumbs up, so. Okay, I'm sorry, will you start over? Thank you.
Okay, you have a copy of last year's budget analysis, what we call a BA, from the Kansas Board of Healing Arts. This is to give you an idea of what information is in them and to get your feedback on what information you'd like us to present during committee. So I'm just going to walk through these pages. On the very first page is what we call front table. This is the summary of the budget. It's broken into operating and capital improvements, and those categories are broken into state general fund and all other funds. And then at the bottom is the full-time equivalent FTE positions. The bottom of the half of the page, you have an agency overview, which just describes what that agency does and what they're responsible for. On the next page, you have major issues from prior years. This is about a 10-year history of bills that have passed, policies that have occurred over the last 10 years or so, and major budget issues that have happened. So that's 2 or 3 pages, depending on the agency and how much change there's been over the last 10 years. At the bottom of page 3, you have the budget summary and key points. This is broken into the current year and the budget year. Now, I will let you know this is the first year of the biennium. So for fee boards, we will actually go over 3 years. You will have the current year 21, the first budget year of 22, and you will have a second budget year of 23. So it'll be a little bit different than what it was last year. Then we talk about performance measures. There's a table about performance measures. And I will let you know for the larger agencies that have multiple programs, toward the back of the budget analysis in the program section, each program will also have a performance measure table specific to that program.
Shirley, could I ask a quick question?
Sure.
What would be an example of programs that might be on one of the budgets that we see?
Every agency is going to have an administration program. And then again, depending on the agency and what they do, what their mission is, their agency will be broken into programs. For instance, Board of Regents has administration. They have post-secondary education, which are the universities and the colleges, and then they have a scholarship program. So on page 6, we have the budget trends and the 10-year table. This gives you an idea of the up and down of the budget over the last 10 years. Now, unfortunately, Healing Arts doesn't have state general fund, so you're just seeing the all funds. And then you can tell from the line graph that it's been trending in an upward trajectory over the last 10 years. The next table on page 7 is what we call the SumOp BUD, which is the summary of operating. One thing I want to note with Healing Arts, obviously they don't have capital improvements, so everything in their budget is operating. That's one of the things we'll talk about when we get to the Regents universities, is they do have capital improvements. So you have to remember when you're looking at a table that says operating, it does not include any funds that are for capital improvements. So operating is just the operating of the agency. And that's broken into the expenditures, different object of expenditures, your salary and wages, contractual services, commodities. State aid to locals is money that passes through to other agencies or other municipalities, other functions, and then other assistance passes through to the public. For instance, in the Board of Regents, your state aid to locals will be money that passes through to the universities, community colleges, technical colleges, Washburn. Your other assistance are scholarships. And then in the last part of the table, you see the financing. So that shows you where the revenue is coming from that pays the expenditures from above. Now, normally, when we're giving a presentation, we don't usually go over these pages that I've just shown you. But if there is something on those pages that you want to talk about or you have a question about, you can always ask us. We usually start budget presentations when we get to the budget overview, because that's where we start with the specifics for the current year, which will be 2021. You'll notice there's a table that shows you what the legislative approved number was for the end of last year's session compared to what they asked for in this session, and then what the governor has provided and the difference between those two. And then you will see text that describes what those numbers are, how they differ from last year, and then they break it into the categories of expenditures. At the very bottom of that table, you will see just a one sentence that the governor concurs with budgets where the governor might have changed something. We will describe what those changes are from what the agency's revised estimate is for the current year. On The next page, we're on page 9. This is for the budget year. And again, this is a little bit different than what it will look like this year because last year was the second year of a biennium and we already had a budget for 2021. So this is again something that looks like change from approved because they already have an approved budget for 2021. This year it will be a little larger box and it will be a new budget year. You'll notice it's the same box that has what the legislature approved, what the agency estimate has changed to, and what the governor's recommending, and any difference. Again, there's a text description that broken down into the categories of expenditures. Now, last year, you'll notice on page 10, they did have a supplemental request. In the current year, in the budget you'll see this year, there'll be a couple of different boxes. You might see information on governor allotments. We will have a box for those, describing those from last year. You will also see supplemental requests if they're asking for additional money. In the budget year, the additional boxes will be enhancement requests if they're asking for additional money in the budget year. And then you will see the reduced resources box where we show you what if the agency was asked to provide reduced resources of 10%, you will see what the budget is for that, and you'll see what the governor took of the reduced resources. On page 11, you have the salary and wage box. This is a descriptor you'll see in all the agencies' budgets. It talks about the pay plan that's in the governor's budget. It will talk about the longevity bonuses that some of the agencies have and the capers. So it's a pretty generic box in all of the agencies, but it'll break down for that agency what those numbers are. On page 12, you see the funding sources. Those are broken down into the major revenue streams that come into the agency. And then depending on the agency, you may have one or more fee funds that are analyzed that tell you what the fee fund is for. And then there will be a table showing you what the fund is doing, how it's tracking, if it's going up or down. We also provide you at the bottom of that table the ending balance, highest ending balance, and lowest ending balance, so you can see if what we call healthy, if it's a healthy fee fund, and they're maintaining their balance. Since this is a fee-funded agency, we also provide a table of the different funds and 2 columns, one, what the current fees are in those funds, and what the statutory limit is to show you whether they're at their maximum. On the next page, page 14, it's just a pie chart. And because this agency doesn't have any programs, this is usually broken down by program. This just shows you the categories of expenditures. And then the last table is your FTE table. If you had capital improvements, the very last part of the budget analysis, again, you would have programs. If you had programs broken out, or if you had capital improvements, that would be at the end of the budget analysis. We usually don't go over these last few pages. Usually the committee we spend a lot more time on the actual current budget and out year budget. But like I said, any of these, if you're interested in them, just let the analysts know and they can go through those. What usually, if I could just continue for a minute, what usually happens is your fiscal analyst will get up, provide the budget analysis information, ask all the questions you want, and then the agency representative will get up right behind them and they will provide whatever testimony that they have. And then at whatever point the chair wants to provide recommendations, whether it's that day or a following day, just let us know.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask the first question, but be thinking of your questions. So Shirley, if you don't normally go over kind of those first few pages and you begin with a budget overview, are we given those kind of the whole thing, that 1 through 7, but you don't start talking about it till on this one, it was the 8th page?
Again, Madam Chair, if there are sections you want us to go over, actually some analysts do give you a little bit of the agency overview, especially if you're not familiar with the agency or if it's a new agency to the committee. But if there are parts that you would want us to go over, we definitely can. For the most part, most analysts will start, it's 7, 8 pages into it with the budgets. A lot of it depends on how much time you have to look at these.
Right. So my question though was, I think you said we're going to go ahead and do paper for these, right? So will we get those first few pages just to peruse on our own, or you're not planning?
Whole thing.
We get the whole thing. Okay.
Whole
That's
thing.
what, yeah, that's what,
It could be 60 pages. You'll get
yes.
all of it.
Yeah. Okay. That's what my question was, is do we get it? But then we'll start on the analysis, right? Okay. That's great. Representative Riley, was that your question? Okay. All right. Any other questions?
If I could just clarify, you are asking the analyst to provide paper copies for the committee?
What is the will of the committee on that? Yes, I think we would really like that. Yep, when we're dealing with numbers and details, I'm loving, I mark them up, so. Okay, I did have one other question. You mentioned if it was a fee-funded agency, then we would see 3 years, but that's,
If it's a biennium.
okay,
In statute, there are numerous agencies that are considered biennials. And what that means is per statute, they have to, they provide 3 years or 2 out years every other year.
okay,
And they're in statute. The dental board, the healing arts, pharmacy, those are all called fee boards because they get no state general fund money. They're driven by fee funds.
so for instance, this one was 2 years because it wasn't on that, but this, when we do the healing arts coming up, it'll be the 3 years. Yep.
Last year was the last year of the biennium, so they
right.
already had the 2 years approved.
Okay. Okay, great. Any other questions? Anyone on WebEx with a question? Okay, I think we'll move on to the next presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, this is the big one. This is after you've heard from the fiscal analyst and you've read the budget analysis, you've asked all your questions, you've heard from the agencies, you have to give recommendations. Now, I think I've stated this before, the recommendations always start with the governor's recommendation. So when you're making a motion, you will say, we approve the governor's recommendation for 2001, and you can do the recommendations, the 2 years separately or 3 years separately, or you can combine them all together. As the fiscal analyst, we just need to hear 2001, 2002, and for the fee boards, 2003. You can do it all in one motion. You can do it separate motions. That's really up to you. For the regular agencies, it's just 2001, 2002, and it's GovRec, and then you amend it.
Okay, just to clarify, 2021 and yeah, okay,
I'm sorry.
I'm just making sure that I didn't hear, yeah, okay, yep.
21, 22, and 23.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Okay, so to just describe a little bit what some of those recommendations could look like, I provided you with a second sheet, which is actually what the subcommittee report looks like, which is what we do. We take your recommendations and we put it into a subcommittee report. So the first page, again, looks very similar to the budget analysis front table. The agency request and governor's recommendation is the text straight out of the budget analysis. in our system. It just grabs the sections of the budget analysis and puts them into this document. You'll notice on the top of the second page, you'll see House Budget Committee recommendation. This is where you come in, and I printed this one off specifically so that you can get an idea of lots of different recommendations. So this is in essence what this committee did last year for the Board of Regents and universities. Now, since I just do a budget analysis that covers all of the universities together, you'll see if there are specific recommendations for a particular university, I break those out separately. So the Board of Regents had 7 recommendations, K-State had 1 recommendation, KU Med Center had 1, and Wichita State had 1. What we usually do is rank those recommendations. Did you add money? Did you delete money? Those usually go first. If you're adding language, which we've talked about those provisos, usually adding language is a proviso. Depending on the language you're adding, it could be a separate section in a bill. The most popular one is review at omnibus. Review at omnibus means we really want to add this money, but we're not sure what the budget's going to look like. So we're going to wait till after the spring consensus revenue estimate, which happens right before you come back and we do omnibus, so that you can get a better feel for how much money there is in the budget. And so that's a review at omnibus. We usually get quite a few of those. The other thing that the House Budget Committee can do that the other committees cannot, and that is to make a notation. And it's not add language, it's nothing that's going to go into the appropriation bill. It's, I want to commend Fort Hays State for keeping tuition low, or I want to commend the community colleges for, you know, whatever it is. It's just a recognition. It could also be a negative recognition if you want somebody to do something better. You can say, I really want this agency to try and whatever. So that's one of the things that you can also have put in the subcommittee report. Again, it doesn't go into the budget, it's just a note. What will happen after we do the subcommittee report, after we've received the recommendations from the committee? Again, we're still working on some of the changes to what we usually do, since this year's a little bit different. In the past, once I finished the subcommittee report, I would present it to the chair, make sure everything is in the, says what the committee actually did, and they don't want to make any edits or there again, you wouldn't be able to make substantial changes without the committee, but tweaks if I didn't word something correctly. We would then put a package together of all of the budgets from this committee that go to report out in House Appropriations. We would attach on the front a what we call signature sheet. I would have to come around and find everybody to sign the signature sheet before the chair presents it to House Appropriations. Because of the paperless, we are not doing that this year. We are still working on what we're going to do, but at this time, I do not believe there will be any signature page. I will provide you further details when some decisions have been made on how we are going to represent that the committee agrees to move the report forward. Now, I want to emphasize that the signature sheet sometimes is confusing for people because they don't want to sign it because they don't agree with what's in the report. And that's not what the signature is for. The signature is to say, we did our duty, we have recommendations that in this process can move forward to House Appropriations. Now, if you don't agree with the report, whether you sign it or not, you can do a minority report. That doesn't mean it comes from the minority party. It means you disagree with something in the report and you want the full committee, House Appropriations, to know about it. I can work with you on that, or to be honest, it's as simple as you type up whatever your statement is. It's usually going to start with, I disagree with or I object to something that's in this report. And anybody can provide a minority report. It's attached to the back of the bundle. And when the chair is reading through the report in House Appropriations, when they get to the last page, they will identify a minority report, and whoever provided the minority report should have the ability to come forward and read it. We haven't had one in a while, but I'm pretty famous for them because I've done quite a few in the past. The bundle that we put together for the full committee will be colorful because at KLRD, everything's about what color paper it's on. So they will be blue, yellow, and green because we have the 3 different years. They are color-coded by year so people can see them, find them more easily. And then if there's a minority report, it's on white. Any questions? I covered a lot there.
I'll go ahead and ask, and then we'll see if the committee has questions. Shirley, when I'm looking at this House Budget Committee report, page 2, House Budget Committee recommendation, and then it goes down, it's got the recommendations. And then on page 3, it says House Committee recommendation. Well, how are those different? What is?
That's full committee. That's House Appropriations.
That is appropriations. Okay.
This entire process, and let me back up and just go through it. This is the history of everything that happened to that agency last session. So first it went, and the reason I know it was heard in the House first is because we put the House on the front. You'll notice there's a thick line in the middle of this document, and then the Senate subcommittee report is attached to the back. It's because the House reported out first, and then the Senate reported out second. But in essence, we go through the House budget recommendations, and then the full committee recommendations, and then again, because after you've reported out all the budgets in appropriations, then you work the bill. And that's usually the last week right before it goes to the floor, and any committee member in appropriations can bring something up. So technically, all the agencies are worked twice. They're worked when you report out, and then they're worked again when you work the entire bill. So you'll notice at the bottom, House Budget Committee recommendation, we came back and did some more work. So there's a second House Budget Committee recommendation. And then you'll notice then we have the Senate subcommittee, and you'll have the subcommittee recommendation, and then the full Senate Ways and Means recommendation. And then this is where they work the bill, and you have on page 6 and about the middle, you have additional Senate committee recommendations. So that's when the full committee heard the entire bill. And then you have the committee of the whole when it went to the floor. And then you have the conference committee. And then on the bottom of page 7, we have State Finance Council when they certified the COVID numbers. And then we had a governor's allotment. And then at the very end, you have on page 8, the final, it's the final numbers for the governor's allotment. And then we add a page once we've certified the budget and gotten with Division of Budget and we all have the same numbers, then we put the table on the back that has all the final numbers. So this is everything that happened to that budget last year.
Okay, thank you. And so when do we see this? Or we don't, I mean, we only see this like, so for instance, when we're doing the regions at this time, we'll be looking at what happened last year, or this is just.
I will create a whole new document.
Mm-hmm.
It will have the front table, the agency, the GovRec,
Mm-hmm.
and then it will have House Budget Committee. After you make your recommendations, I will fill this part out.
Okay.
I will bring it to you to make sure you're okay with the way it's worded, and you will present it at that time to committee.
Okay, I see. So you're
Throughout
just,
the
we're just
session-
adding to it. Okay, I see now. Yep, that's helpful. Okay, committee, any other questions? Yes, Representative Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So after listening to this second reading of that budget comparison to your first document, the first document you did was an example for us of the Board of Healing Arts. And that document was based on a board that most of their money comes from fees. Is that correct?
All of it does.
Okay. And so even though we made a recommendation to cut their fees $1,000, what ramification really does that of what we do impact them? Because they really are controlling their own fees other than what we might sweep 10% out of their funds. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure how to answer that, but let me start with how this committee affects at the end of session, because in essence, when we put the subcommittee report together, the full committee looks at your recommendations. They may agree with them or they may disagree. So your recommendation might not technically go any farther, is maybe the first thing to say, because you have to wait till the end to see what, like if, let's say you wanted to cut healing arts by 1,000 and the Senate only cut them by 500, then it goes to conference committee, and then, you know, we have to figure out what the final change is. The other part of that is you can recommend that they reduce fees. You could cut money out of their expenditures. I'm not sure how you would say specifically to take a certain amount of money out of a certain fee. Does that answer your question?
Indirectly, I think it does. The point is when the fee-based agencies that we're looking at, and I'm sure other subcommittees are doing that same thing, their boards are probably more directly influencing their fees than our recommendations. I guess that's where I was coming from with that, of whatever, you know, we could say, you know, cut your expenditures by 50%, but that's not going to really hold any water.
Their fees are appropriated in the appropriations bill. So if in the appropriation bill, and their expenditures from last year were $6,454, 900. If you wanted to take $1,000 out of that, I would remove $1,000 from that number in the appropriation bill, and they could not expend more than that money.
Thank you very much. That does shed some light on that. Thank you.
To follow up, just a question. I mean, it seems like the fee-funded agencies, they're at the mercy of their fees.
Correct.
And then, but if we were to say, okay, only this much, we'll take 1,000 out, where would we put that? Would that go to the SGF?
I think that might be considered a sweep.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, okay. Okay, did that kind of, yeah, so it does seem interesting to look at their budget coming up when it's not being appropriated out of a big lump, but it's rather being appropriated out of the fees that they will be collecting.
It's their own pot of money. When
Yes.
you think about the SGF as a big pot of money,
Mhm.
this is their own little
Their
pot of
own,
money.
mhm. Yeah, that's interesting. What agencies that we look at are fee funded?
Remember offhand, I think Behavioral Sciences Regulatory Board is, and Healing Arts. Those are the two.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody on WebEx? Nice to see your smiling face, Jesse. Okay, okay, yes, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is there something in statute that says they have to come to us and be approved and appropriated? Otherwise, if they have their own fees, why would they need to even?
Because their expenditure is in the appropriations bill, and how would they get the authority to expend the money since they are a state agency?
They're a state agency. There's the answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, and Representative Rogers, nice to see your smiling face too. I did have one last, I mean, if others have questions too, great, but one question I did have when we said review at Omnibus. So we didn't have an Omnibus this year, did we? I mean, did that happen?
Yes, it did.
Okay, tell us about that.
Well, unfortunately, I had a medical issue at that time last year, so I wasn't really here. It was a really crazy time because of COVID. There was a bill. It was a pseudo appropriation bill that had to do with the COVID and how the money would be used and who had say-so over it. It had a couple of appropriation cleanup items in it. We did have an omnibus memo because we do keep track in our database of things that are to be reviewed at omnibus. We also have to look at every policy bill that has been through one chamber or has passed or has been signed by the governor, and we have to describe any fiscal impact that will come before House Appropriations and Senate Ways and Means to decide whether they're going to pay for it or if it's an unfunded mandate. So that was done. It was just done very quickly. And, but yes, that was all.
Was it at Sine Die? Is that when it happened? I mean, because, you know, we left March 19th, I think, and then we were supposed to come back, but we didn't end up coming back until May.
I believe it was.
Because I know when we left in March, it was kind of like, we were all saying, no, we'll clean this up. There's going to be omnibus. And then COVID got worse and everything. So, okay. Any other questions? Anybody? Okay. I think that was very helpful. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Madam Chairman,
Yes. Sorry.
Madam Chairman.
Sorry, Representative Rogers.
I have my hand up. I was waving or whatever. I'm still trying to figure that out. So
Forgive us. I'm sorry.
I apologize for not being there in person, Ms. Morrow and Madam Chairman. I had somebody in my office, and so what I would just like to offer a couple things as the immediate past chair, if that means anything. We do have. I know some people question why we have something other than higher ed in our budgets. It's simply a matter of everybody has to go through a budget committee to get to that point. I would be remiss. All right, that's not the right word, but I would be, if we're looking at some of these small fee-funded agencies, to look at cutting $1,000 here, $5,000 there. Most of these committees work on a pretty thin budget, and part of it is when they come, they get questioned on some expenses. If something looks out of hand, that's our role in this, is to make sure that, you know, Believe me, we spent a lot of time, I believe 2 or 3 years ago in the appropriations on a car for the Board of Barbering in the full appropriations committee. So it can get to that. It shouldn't. That should be committee work, but that's the way that happened. But Shirley, you did a good job explaining of everything that goes on. What I would say is if folks have a particular issue as you look at the numbers and as they come in with a particular university or college or these other agencies, you try to get those questions maybe answered ahead of time rather than throw a bomb when the chairman is that in front of, so she kind of knows something's coming. It would just help matters a lot. So just if I could add those, but a good presentation again, Shirley. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Okay, yes, Representative Wassinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to direct this to Representative Rogers because when I got on this committee a couple of years ago, he said that we had decided as a group to just do the Board of Regents as a whole, and they took out the money and took care of that, correct? Was it just the committee that had decided that, or was there something bigger in that decision?
As far as when we look, yeah, typically what we don't really break out Regents institutions. We typically don't try to say we don't like this program and we don't like this at a certain university or what we do is the regent comes with their ask, and then as son of support is what the other universities when they come and present before the committee. So yes, typically what happens is the ask is for the Board of Regents, and then the board has that money, distributes that money back out to the universities either based on the budgets that they have presented to the regents or through formulas that go back. Again, those are things that the regents handle. So as far as, I guess we can line item typical university stuff, but typically that's done through the regents.
Did that answer your question?
Sort of. Thank you.
Maybe y'all could discuss that more. Did you? Yeah.
I'd be happy to sit and just chew this out with you, Representative.
Representative Woodard.
Madam Chair, I was just wondering if we might ask Shirley to talk about the unified request that we get from the Board of Regents and how long that's been occurring.
Could you expand on unified request?
That the Board of Regents is the governing body of our universities. We just are one of the many sources of funding for our universities. How long the Board of Regents has been coming with a request for the system for the post-secondaries versus each university coming in here with their own budget request.
Okay, that's a little complicated, so I'll try real hard. The supplemental and enhancement requests have to be voted on and approved by the board and are in the Board of Regents budget. If any of those supplementals or enhancements are added to the budget, they go into the board office and then go out to whoever that enhancement or supplemental was for. Each agency, each university does have their own budget, their own allocations, their own line items, and they do come to the legislature and ask for specific monies for specific programs, and that would be just that university asking for that money. So they can be separate from the regent's request. However, there is also a line item in the regent's budget for the operating grant for the universities, and that is a specific state general fund line item that the legislature has in the past put money into, and then the board, because of their formula and their working, the way they work with the universities, in their agreements, then they send that money out to the universities per their formulas.
Thank you, Shirley, and thank you, Madam Chair. That was the kind of the point I was trying to get to, is the operating grant. I didn't scroll fast enough to find that term, but that being the collective request beyond the regions, and of course, I'm sure we'll hear specific programmatic requests from each institution as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Okay, is there anything else? Ken, do you still have your hand up? Okay. All right, anything for the good of the committee? Anybody? Okay, John, do we have anything we need to tell folks? We won't be meeting tomorrow. I don't think we'll be meeting on Thursday. There is a slight chance that we'll have a presentation. The meeting is on the call of the chair. I'll let you know, but I do think we'll be meeting next Monday. And then shortly after that, I think we'll kind of go into full mode of meeting. Yeah, okay, sounds like it. Okay, so be looking for the agenda for next week. At this moment, we won't have any other meetings this week unless you hear from us about Thursday. Okay, thank you, we're adjourned.